Now to the cryptocurrency crash that has traditional markets on edge, called Binance.
Crypto winter, no laughing matter, worthless artificial gold.
What a scam. It's not a currency, stock, security, it's not backed by gold or anything. You can't wear it, eat it, grow it.
So crypto has made it faster and cheaper than ever before to rip off consumers.
There's no
made it faster and cheaper than
Crypto
ever
winter, between value and usefulness.
Worthless artificial gold.
If you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance you've heard plenty of this stuff. Maybe you think there's good reason for it, or maybe you think it's all so much FUD. That's fear, uncertainty, and doubt if you're new here. Either way, it's easy to see that there's a pretty big perception gap between those who crypto and those who don't. The fall of FTX and revelations around their, to put it mildly, deceptive business practices brought this gap sharply into focus once more and turned it into a kind of Rorschach test. Depending on your predispositions, you might think it's just one more illustration of how dumb and scammy crypto is, or you might think it proves the dangers of centralized finance and the need for more transparent and immutable entities built on the blockchain. So why all these different takes? Sure, politics are more divisive than ever, but for the most part, Web3 remains largely nonpartisan, at least for now. So why are so many people so vehemently anti-crypto, while so many others evangelize it? Could it be that both sides have a point? And what about you? Why are you here? These are all some of the questions we'll be exploring in this episode. We'll also take a look at some of the thinking that got us here in the first place, and how Web3 technology might turn all that on its head. As always, we have a useful case study in Beanstalk, a very special stablecoin experiment we've been following closely. We'll see what we can learn from their unique debt mechanism, and explore how the blockchain makes this possible. All that and more coming up in just a moment. This is Radio Defi, a show about the new frontier called decentralized finance, and how you can understand it. I'm your host, Rex. The goal of Radio DeFi is to inform the public about decentralized finance in a way that's entertaining and accessible. We see the future in these projects and want you to be both excited and well-informed. If you hear us talk about a topic or an organization that strikes your interest, that's great. Just make sure you take your time and do additional research before investing. Also, some of these projects are high risk, so never invest what you can't afford to lose. The late David Graeber, author of Debt, The First 5,000 Years, writes that the concept of virtual money is not really a new one, just a more precise way to keep track of who owes what. Transactions weren't so much the one cow for 20 pounds of grain idea that most of us have. Instead, folks gave what they were able and asked for what they needed, all the while keeping a kind of mental account of roughly who had done what for whom so they could eventually pay it all back. And here we see the first glimmers of debt as we think about it today, although not nearly as rigid. For a long while after official coins were introduced, transactions between the average person remained in this mental credit system, but coinage wasn't going anywhere. Graeber points out that if you look at the origins of issued currency, you find that it's rooted in the payment of soldiers who could use that currency to resupply on long campaigns. How do you get locals to accept these arbitrary pieces of silver as payment for anything? Well, you do have swords after all. Conquered settlements could then be taxed for those same pieces of silver, cementing its value, and thus the concept of money is born. Through taxation, rulers could enforce the use of their currency, which is really nice when you control the means to produce and issue that currency. There are a lot of benefits in sitting on a huge pile of coins you made with 100 hours of labor, especially if you've decided that each one is worth a small house and it wasn't your labor. These kind of benefits have a name, and that name is seigniorage.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, seigniorage is traditionally the difference in value between the raw materials of the money you're producing and the market value of the money you're producing.
That's Ron, a TradFi interloper in our DeFi world.
I am a research analyst at a company that studies financial risk management and the capital frameworks that banks are required to work with around the world as part of their risk management activity.
Ron's not his real name, but he asked to remain anonymous, and we couldn't think of a better one. We were glad to get him on the show to help explain how seigniorage works in the modern era.
To use the example of a dollar bill, it does not cost $1 worth of materials to create a dollar bill. And I mean, it certainly doesn't cost 20 times as much to create a $20 bill as it does a $1 bill. And so every time a government creates a $1 bill, the difference between that cost of raw materials and the value is seigniorage.
That's not too far off from what Graeber described. So have we evolved at all?
In terms of how that is implemented today, I think it does vary from country to country. I mean, some countries do print more of their currency as a way of financing their government expenditure.
Huh. Sounds like a familiar criticism.
Well, ours is a little different, really. I mean, the way the money supply grows in the United States has less to do with the government printing money as it does the government allowing the Federal Reserve to set a policy by which banks can print money, which is a little different. I mean, so the Federal Reserve sets a certain rate at which banks must hold capital as a percent of their total loans, as a percent of their credit. So if I deposit money with a bank, that money is allowed to finance that bank in issuing a greater amount of loans than what I deposited. So if I deposit $100, maybe the bank can issue a $1,000 loan. And it is through issuing these loans that is sort of a primary mechanism through which the money supply grows. So it's really activity in the financial system that is generating dollars. It's not the US government printing a bunch of money and using it to spend on things.
So who benefits from this? Where does all that sweet seigniorage go? To the banks?
In one sense, but the benefits really accrue across the financial system on both the supplier and the consumer sides. For example, I mean, having this system makes it much easier and cheaper to obtain a loan than it would be without it. So it makes it cheaper to obtain a loan for your business or for a mortgage or any purpose. And that is considered a benefit to consumers. And I mean, understandably, I mean, you can definitely see that today now that mortgage prices and rates are going up so much and have practically doubled over the past couple of years. It's seen as a big problem, and so clearly people do value having lower rates on things like mortgages.
So it's not quite as bad as the king on his pile of self-made coins. And absolutely, this stimulates the economy in countless ways, has ripple effects, yada yada. But even assuming the most perfect trickle-down universe, folks with less money who can't afford a mortgage or to start a business don't get the same benefits.
I mean, I think that's a fair point. Yeah, I think that there are certainly people for whom it's hard to make an argument that it is improving things.
Up until very recently, this financial system, a descendant of, well, feudal control, was really the only option anyone had. I mean, what are you going to do? Create something, then arbitrarily decide it has value, then convince millions of people it does too? Hey, Beethoven, did we get Satoshi? We didn't get Satoshi. Maybe next time. Anyway, In late 2021, the Pew Research Center published a study saying that 16% of all Americans had invested in, traded, or used crypto. For many of them, crypto was synonymous with Bitcoin, but others were digging deeper. And what they found was an endless array of new ideas and protocols. Some even started making content describing what they found. Here's one such content creator who goes by Ceazor. That's Ceazor. He runs a YouTube channel called Ceazor Snack Sandwich, which has over 14,000 subscribers. However many protocols you think you know about, Ceazor knows more.
It would be hard for me to say exactly, but like I've got 300 plus videos. If I take the time to read the entire docs, then I take the time to make a video. So quite a bit. And like my basic rule of thumb is that I want to see something that I haven't seen before.
Ceazor's journey into crypto is a familiar one. Starting with Forex trading, basically trading foreign currencies, Ceazor quickly ran into frustrations with traditional finance.
In the past, quite a while ago, I was trading Forex, like TA style trading Forex, and I got wrecked pretty bad just because, whatever, I just made bad choices or anyhow. So then I started just starting to try to do stocks because it's like a lot more passive than, Forex trading, right, with leverage, right? So then after I came across, I think I was using eToro, and they had some options for crypto as well. And then I started, going down that rabbit hole. And so I basically, bought my first little bit of ETH at the bottom of the COVID crash. And, it would have been nice to just go all in then, right? But I was super hesitant. So I got in there, and then I'm intrigued with it because it makes sense to me. I'm a very logical person. And a lot of crypto is very logical, and I can understand why something makes sense. And that's kind of what crypto offers to its users, right? That's kind of why I got into crypto, and then I just started researching everything.
Yeah, it's interesting how many folks we talk to that have a background either in traditional finance or got involved through something like Forex and said, okay, there's this set of rules and norms that's kind of built in traditional finance. And then they see the opportunity that cryptocurrency offers by, not being locked by specific trading hours and not being molded into these boxes that have made wealth building or successful trading difficult that we see in traditional finance. And it's amazing how many folks we run into that say, that was really it. It was the next logical step.
I took a course in Forex, not like a registered course in like a university or anything like that, but kind of just like a trading, some guy who has a trading strategy and sells it basically, right? So I took that, and one of the things that he sold or he gloated about Forex was the ability to trade 24 hours a day, right? And then of course, crypto now is 7 days a week as well on top of that, right? So that was one of the things that I kept thinking about, is that the market hours, the institutions can buy and sell 1 hour before everybody else. Yep. And that to me is just ridiculous. That's not fair. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they basically special amount of power, institutionalized power. Yep.
Yeah. So that's kind of what really brought me to crypto in a sense of it's not that 24 hours, 7 days a week, and then nobody has specialized treatment. The whole idea of decentralization, FTX is an obvious example of why I didn't see FTX doing what they did, but it was definitely from the very beginning I saw that as an issue. Why would I want to leave my money with this company that I don't know anything about? Even putting money into the bank, the TradFi banks in the world, you don't know what they're doing with your money, right? They're not transparent completely about like exactly where your money is going. And that kind of got me as well into crypto and kind of made me a little more interested.
For Ceazor, crypto was a natural progression, driven in part by frustration with how traditional finance was set up. Individually, we all have our stories about dipping our toes into crypto for the first time. Maybe your investments have paid off, maybe they've failed spectacularly. Either way, you're here now, which means you have at least some interest in all this stuff. Maybe you think it could even change the world for the better. But clearly, there are plenty of people who disagree. What is it exactly that sets you apart from all the naysayers around you? What separates a crypto optimist from a crypto never? One study by Jake McMorrow and Mona Saeed Esfahani, published in July 2021 in Holistica Journal of Business and Public Administration, found that the most influential factor on how people felt about crypto wasn't financial knowledge or even technical knowledge, but performance expectancy, meaning that the better you expected crypto to perform, the better you felt about it as an idea. And that kind of makes sense. If you expect cryptocurrency to perform well and make you lots of money, wouldn't you feel that's a good thing? And maybe you want everyone else to be able to make lots of money too. Meanwhile, if you expect crypto to perform poorly, it might seem ridiculous to believe in it as an idea. There's a lot more in there, of course, so we'll link that study in our show notes. But it's clear that our perceptions of crypto, much like everything else, are influenced by what we expect to be true. But the rabbit hole goes even deeper. Where do those expectations come from? One place might be the media, which hasn't exactly been sympathetic to tech companies, crypto or otherwise. Just recently, Matthew Yglesias, a prominent journalist, alleged that the New York Times had a deliberate, widely known, and top-down policy against too much positive tech coverage, and a focus more on investigative reporting in an effort to knock the industry down a peg. So while all this
Worthless artificial gold.
certainly has truth to it, it might not be the most unbiased source of crypto information. And the truth is, in order to make our own informed decisions, it takes some genuine time and effort. The crypto world is ginormous, and each protocol needs to be evaluated separately and on its own terms. Which leads us to what might be the biggest factor yet in shaping how folks feel about crypto: the sheer complexity. They take one look at all the thousands of coins, and tokens, and NFTs, and memes, and lingo, and math, so much math, and they think, screw that. Keep me out of that crazy pocket universe where everything's a scam and JPEGs are worth millions. I'll stick to my index funds, thank you very much. Here's Ron's take.
From the perspective of economists, I think the broad perspective on crypto is that it's a scam, which is a very broad statement. And there's definitely a range of people who make that statement without really doing their research and backing it up. But the reason that I think economists jump to that is because the US dollar is already a digital currency. It's already quick to move things about between institutions that way. So why do we need cryptocurrency? What is it actually accomplishing? And so, that's the way economists look at it. I think that people in finance look at it a little bit more interesting. They may or may not believe that it is generating value yet. It certainly could generate value depending on how certain projects go, but I do think that they also find it just very interesting because it's kind of, it's not really regulated. It's the Wild West. Like anything that you can come up with, you can create, and you can see how it goes and see if it works, see if it doesn't work. So it's kind of fascinating from a finance perspective because it's like a big lab. You can just see all the innovation happening and all the sort of pitfalls and see how people react to them and how people try to get around different problems. I think it's just very interesting to look at. In terms of the general public, I think it's hard to say. I think there's certainly a segment of the general public that views it as a big investment opportunity. With some reason. There's been many high-profile cases of people making a lot of money in decentralized finance and crypto, and I think that naturally appeals to a certain sort of person and makes them want to figure out how they can get in on the action. How big that proportion is of the general public, I'm not sure, but I do suspect it's actually a relatively small proportion. I think that most people who are asked about crypto probably would not have a very clear understanding of it or really all that much interest in it.
So in many ways, despite all the changes and all the innovation, a lot of folks are just not that interested. And to be fair, use cases for crypto are still mostly limited to finance. But over half of Americans reportedly own stock, so there's still a lot of potential for use even today. How does crypto compare to those more traditional options?
Yeah, I mean, in the traditional finance world, I would say that the degree of risk is definitely lower than in the crypto world. You do see downturns, people do lose money, but if you are invested in indexes or mutual funds, you probably aren't losing everything. You might lose some money, but it's not going to just completely disappear. And overall, things do increase. I mean, certainly in crypto, there have been projects that just failed, and for any number of reasons, and people do lose all their money. So, I mean, yeah, I would certainly say that the amount of risk is higher in the crypto world than traditional finance. Although, I mean, that is not to say that it is higher than everything else that is available to your retail investor. I mean, there have been all kinds of schemes that investors have been, in many cases, suckered into that were arguably legal and did make them lose everything. I mean, for example, multi-level marketing schemes and different sort of like penny stocks and real estate deals.
So while there are ubiquitous and undeniable risks in anything to do with crypto, Ron describes a scenario that looks maybe a little safer and certainly less volatile. But that's not a hard and fast rule. And as Ceazor pointed out, legacy financial markets are built to favor large institutions, not individuals. For the average person, the wider investment and financial world can seem like a big, imposing building filled with locked doors. Teachers, blue-collar workers, gig workers, just about nobody has access to the kind of financial tools that the big guys do, so they're effectively locked out. But what Web3 technology offers and DeFi wants to build is a set of keys. A lot of people seem to think that that's a bad idea, that some of these doors are closed for a reason. So do they have a point?
Yeah, I mean, that gets kind of interesting because, I mean, so retail investors, that's a very broad group, and I think it can be useful to separate it actually into a bit more granular. Because, I mean, in the US, we have a system that creates different categories of retail investors. Some people are named accredited investors, and others are not. And to be an accredited investor, you either have to have a lot of money, or you have to have the right sort of education and sort of provable certification in order to make that claim that you are accredited. And what accreditation gives you is the opportunity to invest in a wider range of instruments and a wider range of securities. So, for example, something like investing in startups, venture capital, is something that is limited to accredited investors. And so if you want to find startups and put your money in them and play it risky and hope to win big, then you either need this certification or you need to already have a lot of money. And sort of the rationale behind that is that these are riskier investments. And because they are riskier investments than things like stocks and bonds, you have to have either a certain amount of financial literacy in order to invest in them, or you have to have enough money that you could afford to lose some and be okay.
And that right there is the crux of the difference. TradFi has some guardrails built up. Any stock you buy is certified by the SEC, so it can be less risky than picking up some random meme coins. But what about understanding and accepting that risk? There's no accrediting system for crypto investing, but shouldn't someone like Ceazor, who clearly takes the time to understand these projects, be able to make his own decisions? However you feel about it, the point may be moot anyway. Risk or not, the genie is out of the bottle. For better or worse, humanity has entered an era where a conscious, intentional redesign of our financial system is, at least theoretically, possible. And it's not just theory anymore. Right now, today, attempts are being made and experiments are underway. So let's take a look at one of those experiments, Beanstalk. If you missed episode 1, Beanstalk is a unique stablecoin protocol that we've been following and doing our best to peer under the hood as it develops in real time. Beanstalk Farms also funds this podcast, so thank you for that. The center of what Beanstalk is as an idea, its stock, if you will, is its algorithm. Now, that's not to say that it's just an insanely complex, formless code, though there is some of that. But what that code creates is an elegant, reasonably succinct economic model designed to keep being a safe, stable, and attractive economic environment, which isn't to say that it's easy to understand.
I looked at it as kind of like a challenge to explain what is Beanstalk. And that's maybe kind of one of maybe a con. I don't want to say it's a bad part because the complexity of the system makes it work, right? But I think maybe that's why adoption's harder for Beanstalk than, say, something like, I don't know, USDC or something. It's not simple, right? So maybe this is why the first thing that kind of attracted me to it, I saw it as like, oh, this makes sense. Like algo stable coins were still kind of also acceptable. You know what I mean? Like there were quite a few of them around. It kind of looked like an algo stable coin to me. I know it's not, but it can be kind of like, if you explain it as an algo stable coin, then it kind of makes it a little bit less difficult for people to understand what's going on, right? But I think that's what mainly attracted me to it, was like it was like a challenge for my mind. And like sometimes I make videos and I'm like, okay, that's done, and I feel good, and I walk away from the computer after it's published and shared and tweeted out, and I feel like, I feel kind of proud of like, my ability to take that complex thing and simplify it down into a simple video for people to understand. And Beanstalk did that for me to a high degree because it was a challenge to understand.
Hard to understand or not, the proof is in the bean pudding. At a high level, the Beanstalk protocol is a singular mandate: oscillate the bean price above and below $1 through mechanisms that can influence prices up or down as needed. If the price of bean is close to $1, that means that all the complexity is working as intended. For a stablecoin, driving a price back down is the easy part, although even that bit is easy to get wrong. In Beanstalk's case, it simply mints more beans and distributes them to various participants in the ecosystem. This increases supply, which reduces demand, and down goes the price. The real trick is getting it back up again. But one of the best things about DeFi is that you can set things up however you want and experiment. If you want to completely redesign the global financial system, you can give it a shot. Beanstalk needed a way to push the price of bean back up to peg, and what they came up with is truly unique. When the price of bean is below $1, the protocol incentivizes market participants to buy and lend beans to Beanstalk, burning those beans in the process. This decreases the supply and drives the price back up. The amount of debt the protocol offers in return adjusts depending on whether market participants are taking the deal or not, and it pays the debt off through another clever innovation called first in, first out.
First in, first out, I mostly have seen applied in the accounting world and less as a structure in finance. I'm sure it might exist, but I mean, one traditional application of it in the accounting world would have to do with inventory management, for example. Like you assume for the purposes of accounting for the value of the inventory you're holding, that the first things that came into your inventory are the first things that are being sold, the first things that are being removed from your inventory. And the idea is that you don't want to assume that you're holding on to a bunch of things that are just getting older and older. It's that they're cycling through and your inventory is staying sort of at a stable average age.
So an inventory management system adapted for use in debt management. Is there any reason that isn't typically done?
Well, I think it hasn't really been implemented because it's just not how debt issuance typically works. Usually when you issue debt, it's for a set term. So there's no order. As with mortgages, there might be a senior claim, like the bank has a senior claim on your house when it issues a mortgage. But in terms of offering loans, it's more that you set the percentage and you set the term and the frequency of payment and the premium, and that defines the loan. There's not really any first person to be the first out. It's just not how it's usually defined.
So yeah, it's not generally done because it's just not generally done. So again, this is what's so great about DeFi. The ability and willingness to do things differently. First in, first out is basically unheard of in traditional finance, especially as a payment schedule, but it allows Beanstalk to attract lenders in the most efficient way possible. Of course, it's impossible to know for sure how long it will take a lender to see their returns, but the very fact that Bean's price is still oscillating around $1, even during the FTX debacle, in the beariest bear market in recent memory, proves that there are plenty of investors who still find this model attractive. It also shows a lot of confidence that the protocol will continue to grow, with other projects building on top of the Beanstalk ecosystem. What's the reason for this confidence? In 2 words, positive carry. In 1 word, silo. If those words mean nothing to you, don't worry, we'll get to that next time. We'll also explore some of the things being built on top of Beanstalk right now, today. Protocols built on top of cryptocurrencies exist in a parallel financial universe, one with different fundamental laws, which means that our intuitions about what's possible or not just might not apply. For a builder, what could be more exciting? Bear market or not, builder's gonna build. The bears might be hibernating for now, but when they wake up, they'll find a very different world, minus at least one major trading platform, but full of brand new ideas and tools to explore. That's all coming up next episode, and we hope to see you there. Now, we make no secret of the fact that we at Radio DeFi are big Beanstalk fans. In the spirit of DeFi, which at its ideological best can be radically transparent, we think it's important that we're upfront about that fact. But the great thing about radical transparency is that it can help you grow as well. Criticism is a healthy thing, both through Beanstalk and for this podcast. So if you have thoughts or disagreements, maybe some ideas for what we should look at next, or really anything else you'd like to share, we welcome your comments, honestly. You can find us on social media or send us an email at audiofarmsproduction@gmail.com. That's audiofarms with an S, production@gmail.com. We read every email you send, and that's a promise. And don't forget to rate and review. Radio DeFi wants to reach as many people from as many walks of life as possible, and a 5-star rating is the best way to help us do that. Thanks. Radio DeFi is an Audio Farms production, funded with grant money provided by Beanstalk Farms.